And now it's my pleasure to bring on stage in person someone I've been learning from for what, 3 or 4, come on up here, 3 or 4 digital events.
Yes.
Jeannie Henson is just an incredible resource, and we should always have, when organizers get together, we should always have someone like Jeannie in the room, so instead of wondering what our customers want, we can just ask them.
All right, thanks,
Thank you.
Sam. Well, I'm extremely honored to be here today. Sam had told me I would be the only exhibitor, and I kind of let that go in one ear and out the other, and then I got here and I was like, oh yeah, I really am the only one. And I know some of you personally, some of you are my association leads, and don't hold this against me later. We'll talk after the show. A little bit about myself before we dive in. I am 20-plus year veteran in the industry, all in healthcare events and exhibitions. Yes, like many of you, I am a child prodigy in the industry. So what I wanted to also share with you is I have experience in both domestic and international events. I was a trade show nerd before COVID. I am still a trade show nerd now. I have a deep love for this community and for what we get to do every day. I love my job. I love the people that I work with. I love the opportunity to meet new people. And I do it in healthcare, which is great. So you can't get much better than that. The company that I work for, Siemens Healthineers, is a multi-billion-dollar healthcare medical device company that is a global organization with more than 60,000 employees worldwide. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what my book of business is annually, because it's going to give you some insight as to, does she really have any idea what she's talking about? And I do. And it's my perspective, so I really get to say whatever I want, which is also a great thing. And hopefully you get some insights from that. I want to pause really quickly because Chris and Jeff, I want to commend you on what you just talked about. I had so many gold star moments and vigorous head nods. I don't know if you caught that. And so if you're taking the time to be that transparent with your exhibitors, well done. So I have a team of 6, only 4 of which are exhibit planners. One of which is a newly hired operations manager, and I'm going to talk about why I'm changing my model from a staffing perspective and talk about some permanent changes from my side of things as we go on. And I have one who's a marketing and communications specialist. And that's going to be relevant when we start talking about numbers. And so you kind of gleaned from this, why am I here today? I'm here to share with you what my perspective and experiences have been throughout COVID. And what I would tell you is there are moments over the last 2 years, knowingly and unknowingly, I would tell you, have defined my career. They have changed the way I work. They have changed the way that I lead my team. They've changed the way that I interact with my colleagues and also my family. And so it's a little bit of my story, and it's going to be representative of some of your exhibit managers, heads of exhibit teams, directors of exhibit management teams, and it may not be reflective at all. But the insights that I want to share with you are much like what Chris and Jeff talked about, is how you engage with your exhibitors and why it's going to be so critical as we continue. So pandemic era planning is not fun stuff. A little bit of background on volume. So going into COVID, or BC, as I now refer to it as BC, before COVID, we had an average of around 120 trade shows. That was a significant uptick over the last few years, 2014 into 2019. We actually, and what's relevant to note here is our fiscal year runs September to October. So if you're looking at my numbers closely, you're going to say, how did she manage to pull off 50 trade shows in 2020? Well, my fiscal year started in 2019. So that would be the hallmark there. With COVID, we saw an immediate and rapid decline, just like everybody did. Things went completely dark there for a little while, and we quickly shifted to virtual whenever and wherever possible. At this point in pandemic era planning, we're trending at about 100 trade shows for this year. My fiscal year will end at the end of September. So it's around a 16% decrease. And of course, at the start of the calendar year, we were still impacted by COVID. We were still seeing cancellations. We were still seeing postponements. So some of that's a little bit of an organic decrease. Some of it is we had some shows who simply don't continue. Economically, financially, it was difficult. I know it's been difficult for our associations. I've had those conversations to take the time to ask. And for some, we chose not to return. okay? We decided to focus our efforts where we knew we were going to get some type of return, and I'm not gonna say return on investment, because I don't have any right now. There is no return on investment in healthcare. It's not immediate. We have an elongated sales cycle, an elongated contracting process. So there's not a single show my organization went to this year that I walked out of saying, we netted XXX from this show. I might know it in 2 or 3 years' time, depending on the nature of the contract. And so keep that in mind also with your exhibitors. What does their contracting and their sales cycle look like? If they're direct sales on show floor, great. They're rolling out of there with return on investment. If it's not, how long? How long before they see that? Because my job now every day is to say, this show is still worthwhile, and let me tell you why. Okay? So, BC, before COVID, we were around about 80,000 square feet over the course of the year in booth real estate. At this point in 2022, we're at about a 37% decrease. Again, we lost some shows, right, due to high numbers at the start of the year. And we're trending right around 50,000. We'll finish the year not much higher than that. It's unlikely that we will return to the same level of square foot investment going into 2023 or even 2024. And it's not because we're not necessarily not attending, but we are spending our dollars in other ways, and we're trying to be very, very savvy about how we're using our space. We are doing less. We are doing less, and we are not doing it with more. We're simply doing less, okay? Overall, we're seeing about a 24% decrease in budget. If any of you, and most of you have, right, a background in marketing, and depending on what type of company you've worked for, you know that when a marketing budget gets decreased, it rarely goes back up again. And in healthcare, and in med device in particular, that's absolutely relevant. We're not marketing directly to consumers. We're marketing to the government, to hospitals, to physicians, to clinicians. So we won't see those dollars return. We will get more and more and more creative, as we do. So in addition to what you're seeing here, this reflects our key segments. So these are shows that my team's specifically touching on the daily. We have about another around 100, 150 trade shows on average that go through our online program. So we're doing a lot of chapter and pop-up events. And in the scheme of things, those are important. They're important to our customers. We're actually seeing a real uptick there, not just in the number, but in their attendance, because people aren't having to travel. They are smaller attended shows. In healthcare, there's a greater comfort level with that. They're not as crowded. So the recovery process in healthcare will be a little bit slower, comparatively to other market segments. And we're aware of that, right? It's a circular kind of vicious process, though. Being in the industry, I also understand that this slow recovery also impacts local economies, right? A trade show that would have drawn 70,000 in attendance the year before for a local economy, millions and millions of dollars, won't see the same. The economy is impacted as well. So all these things are rolling through my head when I'm thinking about our trade show strategies for the year. Keep these in mind, these metrics, as we proceed, okay? So from my perspective, there is no end to COVID. Every day is still a COVID day. There is no normal. We are planning and considering things that we have never planned or considered before. We are trying to define on a daily basis what is virtual, what is digital, what is hybrid, what will it be tomorrow, what will it be 2 weeks from now, how interested will our customers be, how likely will our associations, continue to offer those opportunities. So it's all different. In the course of the last 2 years, I went from a team and myself, traditional exhibit managers, core competency in tactics, logistics, strategies around trade shows. I sometimes now feel like a part-time epidemiologist. I don't have a healthcare background, but at any given moment over the last year, I could tell you what the COVID numbers were in whatever state and city and county we were going to be in. I could also tell you what the levels were at the hospitals, because in healthcare, it's not just about the transmissions rates. It's how impacted are the local communities and hospitals, and what impact will my company have by attending? What are the proper protocols for testing? What are the proper masks to wear? When should you wear them? When should you not wear them? If they're traveling in from outside of the United States from within my organization, how do you get into the country? How do you get out of the country? What kind of tests do I need to get in, to get out? What kind of mask do I have to wear on the plane? I've written more letters to embassies around the world for exemption status on visas than I ever have, ever in my career. I'm fairly certain at some point I will end up on a no-fly list for that reason alone. So, we are travel advisors, coders, medical advisors. We're also coming up with plans for contact tracing. For some of us, this also meant, and depending on the size of the company, whether small, medium, or large, some companies, regardless of their size, regardless of their revenue annually, you have exhibit managers who are coming up with a COVID protocol for their organization. I happen to be one of those, and I work for a rather large company. It was absolutely essential to me, though, that I have a voice in what that process looked like, because I fundamentally believed two things. There is no replacement for a live event, which is not to say that digital, virtual, hybrid doesn't have its place, but there's no replacement for it. And two, I also hated the news of these types of events are the spreaders and spearheads for COVID. You're safer at most trade shows than you are by going to your local grocery store, especially at its peak. My company returned to trade shows last summer at the height of Delta. We went into a trade show. We had not one person return COVID positive. So we had a detailed plan in place. We had a risk assessment for every show that we were doing. We worked closely with our organizers. Some of you, I probably drove absolutely nuts with my litany of questions. So transparency is king. Be upfront about what you are or are not doing. And it's okay if you're taking a back seat on what your health and safety plans are. Share that information. Otherwise, there are going to be the me's who are going to call you every day saying, can you tell me something? Can you tell me something? Have you made a decision? Have you made a decision? Just let me know what it is. Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, great. I just need to know. I don't have an opinion. I just need to know, because there's 3,000 people asking me the same questions, not for just your show, but for the 100 plus that my team's trying to manage, right? You are all focused on your individual programs. You may have small chapter events throughout the year, subsets of teams that are helping you, one big annual event. One. I have 100. That's common, right? Big companies, small companies, smaller the company, you have fewer resources trying to manage a full roster of activity for the year. And we didn't get any additional budget or any additional resources to now figure out our virtual experience and our hybrid experience. So in most instances, one person who was already doing the work of 2 or 3 is now doing the work of 4 or 5. So just food for thought. Virtual was rough on us. It was rough on all of us. And if you haven't checked on your exhibit managers lately, you probably should. We are not okay. My team likes to refer to virtual as the we don't talk about Bruno moment. If you have kids, you understand the movie reference. Our first foray into a major virtual experience was for our estate. John's in the audience here somewhere. In addition to being able to reflect and recite COVID statistics for the worldwide, I also could tell you the time zone for every country and how many languages were relevant, because that's what, the first big jump into a really heavily invested virtual experience was. We're going to do it. It's going to be fully live. We're going to offer it in every language at every possible time. I didn't sleep for weeks. I took the entire month of December off. I spoke to no one. So short list of permanent impact, and I've been touching on these already, right? How we plan and what we plan for is changed. Virtual is always going to be part of the discussion now. COVID planning is always going to be part of the discussion now. My team actually, prior to COVID, also took on a full roster of safety planning also. And the reason for that was we attended a trade show not long after the shooting in Las Vegas. And we saw here on the news recently, right, the mass exodus at the arena out of fear. We heard loud noises, people exited. I had that happen at a trade show. On the third and final day, I had colleagues who were injured, had to be, evacuated to the hospital. It was a false alarm. Nevertheless, people got hurt. And I walked out of that saying, we don't know what to do. My children are better prepared for this moment than we are. And we got really lucky. It's not impossible, however. So we already had taken the step of a full safety plan. We will re-educate everybody on that as we go into trade shows again, because we're all functioning with heightened awareness right now. And so they need to know what the plan is. They need to know what the rally point is. They need to know who to call in case of an emergency, and we'll cover those again. So now we are your therapist, we are your healthcare planner, we are your safety planner, we are your travel advisor. You know, sometimes we advise on dress code. Should I wear the brown shoes, the black shoes? We cover all the bases. We make sure you're fed, how to get to the airport, how to get in the cab. We're covering all those things. Oh, and we're building the booth and supporting the organization and making sure our goals are met, okay? We don't have the information that we need right now to justify spend. And for those of you that are actively involved with EACs or your exhibitors, we've probably been bugging you for data for years. I know I have been. The more you give me, the more I want. So, and data privacy complicates that. GDPR makes that even more complicated, and we know it. But the more you give me, the more I want. And right now, the Slido to me was very interesting on, we're being kind of vague on the numbers that we're giving you. You've just made my job infinitely more difficult, because my job is to sit down with a CEO who makes far more than me, much more important than I am, and say, no, I think this is really a good idea. No, I have no idea what the attendance is going to be like. No, I don't know. I don't know. I already know attendance is going to be down. I look at numbers. I look at all your numbers. SHOT Show, RSNA, you name it. Wherever I can find numbers, I'm looking for them. Look at Ken's numbers, I look at Sears numbers, whatever numbers I can find. And I'm working, you know, and predicting my own forecast of what I think attendance is going to be like for this year and the next year and the next. And that's the guidance that I'm giving. So if you think you're saving yourself by fudging the truth, for those of us that have been doing this for a hot minute, you're not. Okay? We need it. It's critical. Access to information of all kinds. Your data, your health and safety plan, you know, what's registration going to look like, all of the information that you have. And Chris hit on a really important point, and I've had this conversation as well, which is in the process of COVID, we all started, right, at the very beginning with the rally cry of, as an industry, we are in this together. We are in this together. And we started forming a community. And we started talking about, here's what's working. I went to this show did this great, this show not so much. Here's what I'm doing with my team. Here's how we're coping. And those conversations are still happening. You know, I'm still talking with my colleagues who are, for all intents and purposes, working for the companies that are my organization's competition. We meet monthly, and we talk about all of it. You know, I had this great success. I went to this show. The show kit was terrible. We had 47 additional labor forms we weren't prepared for that amounted in $80,000 in cost. Whatever those topics are, we're also starting to talk about inflation and the raising prices and how we're going to continue. Because again, our budgets aren't getting any bigger. We don't have anything to justify the spend, right? Hybrid's going to remain. It's going to remain for those of us that can manage it, whether we've got internally built platforms, external platforms that we really feel good about, the resources to maintain it, the budget to maintain it, and the sanity. So, okay. And for some of us, COVID is still very much a thing, and particularly in healthcare. I was saying to Ellen just before my presentation time, I happened to pull the COVID map last night, as I do. Took a good look at it, and then actually pulled the COVID map, as I did, from June of 2021. They are almost identical in their appearance. So COVID's still happening. We make our personal choices. We're so tired of it. Everybody's so tired of it. Not much better in all reality, right? Here's my Slido. How many of you are scheduling in-person meetings with your exhibitors? And I'm asking this question because if you aren't, you should be. And I've already said why. We're already forming our own communities, and we're having a level of information exchange that is unlike anything that we had before COVID. If you're only doing it annually and you've maintained it as an only annual experience during COVID, I don't know if you're personal exhibitors, but I would tell you from my perspective, that was a mistake. Again, you need that level of information. So some good news. We are seeing attendance. SHOT Show had great attendance. You grew your floor plan. RSNA had great attendance. Natural Products Expo West had great attendance. I love to see attendance in the tens of thousands. Nothing makes me happier. I skip into somebody's office saying, look at this. They had great attendance. There's hope for all of us. Now, admittedly, attendance across the board is down, but it could be worse. And that is always the immediate statement. It could be worse, because I've been to that show. It's very depressing. Earlier in the year, there was reporting 84% of business travelers expect to attend conferences. That's what we like to see. So we know that they're returning to travel. We're seeing it daily on the news. We're having unprecedented numbers. Not all of that is leisure travel. It's business travel as well. It's fantastic. We're going to get, shot in the tush a little bit with rising costs, and we'll probably see some decline. That's my hypothesis, but let's hope not. SEER came to the table, great index reports. If you haven't gotten them, I highly recommend them. 90% of events completed as scheduled this year. Fantastic. Fantastic. I love to arm myself with that kind of knowledge. 15.3% surpassed pre-pandemic levels. So excellent. Every bit of good news I can find, even if it's not relevant to healthcare, I'm pulling it. I'm looking at your good news, I'm looking at your bad news, and I'm coming up with my own opinions. And so are some of your corporate exhibit managers, whether it's small company or big company. Please don't kid yourselves thinking that they're not. So some bad news. We're looking at all the numbers. We're looking at all the numbers, and we're talking to each other. Attendance is improving. For some of us, we probably want it to see, improve a little bit faster. It's just not going to happen, though. But that means each and every day, we have the daily justification for what we're doing, how much we're spending, and are we really seeing the return? Because as much as I will tell you that ROI right now is a dirty word, my executives still love ROI. So budgets aren't getting any bigger. Data privacy is making it much more difficult for data in general, for me to get what I need to generate data on my own platforms, to get your data. It's making things complicated. And if you don't know what GDPR is, I'm going to assume everybody is in this room GDPR savvy. It's the worst thing. Worst thing. Necessary evil, worst thing. Bane of my existence every single day. Inflation is going to be the next big topic. Fuel prices, right? It's terrible. So now I'm not only thinking about, okay, how do I offset, these diminishing returns in terms of attendance, impact, what have you. My budget's flat. And in some instances, it's costing me anywhere from 2 to 5 times more to do what I did 2 months ago. My kids are having a bake sale after. I appreciate your donations. That's how we're getting that done. Or we're simply not doing it. We're going to start changing the model of what we're buying. For example, I'm a big exhibitor at some shows. I'm going to buy a massive amount of square footage, and then I'm going to buy several meeting rooms off the floor. I'm not buying the meeting rooms. I'm not going to offer coffee in my booth. I'm going to minimize my sponsorship investment. I'm going to make sure that every single thing I do is driving people to my booth, period. That's an impact to you. You're getting less money from me. So when you can, sit down with your exhibitors, make sure you're giving them room to talk about those pain points. You can't necessarily change it. For some, you may have the flexibility and the wherewithal to say, how can I help you? Can we get creative on pricing? Have those moments. It's not going to be a quick recovery from this one. Lack of standardization regarding health and safety protocol. Again, Chris, kudos to you for keeping it consistent. People knew what to expect. Monkeypox. I've had at least half a dozen people in my organization over the last 2 weeks calling me saying, do we need to come up with a protocol for monkeypox? To which I said, I can't talk about it right now. Okay. So next, How many of you are working with your exhibitors to control the rising costs? Great. Keep the conversations going. And if you haven't checked in with them lately on rising cost, I encourage you to do so, right? It's a different discussion today than it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. We didn't have a plan for this coming into it. We had no plan. So long-term sustainability. One of the great things, even with kind of diminishing returns on attendance, is you see by and large across the industry, and I've experienced it firsthand, is the quality of conversation is exponentially improved, right? Because what you have are the attendees who are invested in being there. They're there to look at your product, they're perhaps in the buying cycle, they're highly informed, they're highly educated, they have come in with a plan, and the conversations are excellent. And that's great. That's what, we want to see that, right? So you kind of cleared out some of the transient traffic and you're really getting that focused KOL, investor, what have you. Is it going to be enough long-term? Maybe. For me in healthcare, that's going to be tough because again, I'm not going to see my return on investment for about 2 years. So I've got probably another 6-7 months saying, but the quality of conversation has been excellent. Okay. Are we exploring our options? Yes, we definitely are. What options? All the options. Is it more cost-effective and impactful for me to have my own event? Then I can do what I want. I can have it wherever I want, whenever I want, for however long I want, and invite whomever I ask. Standalone hosted events, road shows, depending on your market segment, it's all being considered. Having our own virtual platforms, absolutely. Bigger companies, definitively. We're reaching out virtually in ways that have nothing to do with your trade show. We started bifurcating our strategy for virtual a year ago. The attendee who's in person is not necessarily, and right now statistically, not going to get online at the same time. So we started targeting for activities before and after on our own platform because we could. It's not the luxury that every company has, but those that can do, and they will continue to do so, okay? Are we redefining how and what we measure? Duh. Yeah, I'm looking at dwell time. Dwell time. What things are they logging into? What experiences are they taking in the booth? How much time are they spending there? And I don't know specifically if it's Sam or it's anybody else, but I know that some person spent 30 minutes at this particular opportunity in my booth versus this where it had none. And these videos had 7 minutes versus 10 minutes of interaction. And we're killing those products saying, hey, you were really successful here. So we're not going to represent you on the show floor. We're going to find other ways of doing it. We've made modifications after modification. And we're going to continue to do that. But we're looking at those digital experiences. We're looking at any possible data, and we're coming up with new data sets. So happy to talk about it more. I think I'm out of time.
Yes.